What if I told you that the very thing you've been doing to manifest your dreams is exactly what's keeping them away? Have you ever wondered why you can think about your goals day and night, repeat affirmations until your voice cracks and still nothing changes? It feels unfair, doesn't it? You're doing everything right, positive thinking, daily mantras, visualization boards, yet life seems stuck in the same loop. Here's the uncomfortable truth Neville Goddard revealed. Your subconscious doesn't care about what you think. It only responds to what you feel. That's why thinking versus feeling is the real battle, and why so many people end up frustrated when affirmations aren't working. Because if thought points the way, feeling is what actually takes you there. Your emotional state is the blueprint of your reality, and your subconscious responds instantly to it. That's the hidden mechanism behind the law of assumption, the reason imagination creates reality only when clothed in emotion. And here's the paradox. The harder you try to think your way into a new life, the more you push it away. But the moment you shift into feeling, as if the end is already done, the entire world starts rearranging itself around you. That's the secret Neville kept repeating. Feeling is the secret. So if you've been trapped in positive thinking without results, stay with me, because in this video, you'll discover why thought versus emotion manifestation makes all the difference, how to stop wasting energy on empty affirmations, and the exact way to live in the end so your desires stop being a wish and finally become your reality. So many people have been told, just repeat this phrase every day and your life will change. Sounds easy, right? But the truth is, countless people spend months, even years, repeating affirmations without seeing any real shift. That's when frustration kicks in. They start wondering, maybe this doesn't work for me. And that's exactly where the trap of mental effort begins. It's like trying to push a door that only opens by pulling. The harder you push, the more exhausted you get, and nothing moves. The same happens when someone believes that sheer repetition of thoughts will change reality. Thinking abundance isn't the same as feeling abundance. Neville Goddard made this distinction crystal clear. What shapes the outer world is not the pile of memorized phrases, but the emotional tone behind them. There's a huge gap between thinking rich and feeling rich. Most people stumble here because they confuse mental noise with creation. Think of someone studying for an exam. They read the material over and over again, but they don't feel confident. When test day arrives, their mind goes blank. Why? Because knowledge alone wasn't enough. The missing piece was the emotional state of certainty. The same is true when affirmations aren't working. People wake up early, plaster sticky notes on their walls, fill the mirror with positive statements. Yet deep inside, they still feel fear, lack, or insecurity. And which one wins? Always the feeling. The conscious mind repeats words, but the subconscious responds only to the emotional state it senses. It's like having a movie script with no actors, no music, no emotions. Empty. The audience, the subconscious, won't buy into it. Words alone don't persuade. What convinces is the atmosphere charged with emotion. That's what makes the scene real and believable. Many think the problem is discipline. I just need to repeat it more. So they double down on effort, repeating affirmations like a broken record. But the real issue isn't lack of repetition. It's lack of emotional depth. It's not how many times you say it, it's how deeply you feel it. Picture a child afraid of the dark. You can repeat 1,000 times, there's nothing there. The child won't believe it. But if someone they trust holds their hand, the fear melts away. Why? Because the feeling of safety overrides the logic of words. That's exactly how the subconscious works. This is the big trap, mistaking thought for creation. People assume that mentalizing equals materializing, without realizing that only when thought sinks into feeling does manifestation begin. When the idea drops from the head into the heart, that's when it gains creative power. That's why Neville kept insisting. Mental effort without emotion leads to exhaustion, but mental effort infused with feeling turns into fertile ground. And it's right at this turning point, from thinking into feeling, that the law of assumption truly starts to move, which brings us to an even deeper distinction. Neville Goddard often pointed out a subtle but powerful truth. There's a world of difference between thinking about something and actually feeling it. Most people don't realize they're stuck at the surface, recycling thoughts, while the real creative force lies underneath. Thought is like the spark, but feeling is the fire. You can think 1,000 times, I am successful, but if the feeling inside contradicts it, if doubt, fear, or lack are stronger, your subconscious won't register the thought as real. This is why so many get stuck with affirmations not working. Words are empty shells until emotion fills them. Think of it this way: thought is the seed, but unless it lands in the soil of feeling, it doesn't grow. The soil is what nourishes, what transforms a tiny idea into a living, breathing reality. Without that, the seed just sits there lifeless, waiting for something to activate it. Neville wasn't dismissing the power of thought. He simply explained that thought alone doesn't manifest. It points the way. Feeling, however, imprints the subconscious, and the subconscious doesn't argue, doesn't reason, doesn't ask for evidence. It simply accepts whatever emotional state you dwell in as the truth. This is why he famously said, "Feeling is the secret." He meant it, literally. Feeling is the language the subconscious understands. It's not about logic, it's about atmosphere. You live in a certain emotional climate long enough, and reality has no choice but to mirror it. Imagine standing in the rain. You don't have to tell yourself, "I'm getting wet." You feel it instantly. That's how the subconscious reacts to emotion. When you immerse yourself in a feeling, it bypasses thought and writes itself directly into your inner script. That's when manifestation begins. Thoughts are like signposts. They tell you where you could go, but feelings are the actual road you walk on. You can stare at the sign all day, but until you take the path and feel your feet moving, you're not going anywhere. That's the gap most people miss. Neville taught that imagination creates reality, but only when imagination is saturated with feeling. It's not about repeating, "I'm free," while secretly trembling inside. It's about assuming freedom so deeply that your body relaxes, your breath changes, your energy shifts. That's when your world responds. So whenever you catch yourself asking, "Why isn't this working?" I've been saying it every day. Pause and check. Are you just thinking it or are you feeling it? Because the law of assumption doesn't respond to the words, it responds to the state you embody. And here's the beauty. Once you understand this distinction, everything changes. You stop wasting time trying to convince yourself with empty thoughts, and you start living from the feeling itself. And once that shift happens, the question becomes, why do thoughts without feeling never manifest in the first place? People often wonder, "I've been saying affirmations for months, why isn't anything changing?" The reason is simple. Thoughts without feeling don't carry creative weight. They stay on the surface, bouncing around in the conscious mind, never sinking deep enough to touch the subconscious. Think of a radio. You can twist the dial all you want, but if you're not tuned to the right frequency, you won't hear the music. Thoughts are the dial, but feelings are the frequency. Without emotional alignment, the station stays silent. Nothing plays out in your reality. Neville Goddard always emphasized this point. The subconscious responds to feeling, not to logic or repetition. You can repeat, "I am loved" all day long, but if you still feel lonely at night, your world will reflect that loneliness. The subconscious records the emotional state, not the words. That's why affirmations not working frustrate so many people. They do the work with their mind, but their emotional state of manifestation stays unchanged. They're essentially sending mixed signals, one from the lips, another from the heart. And the heart always wins. Imagine planting a seed on concrete. You can water it daily, whisper kind words, even shine a light over it, but nothing grows. The soil isn't there. Thoughts without feeling are just like that, seeds with no ground to root in. Feeling is the soil that makes them come alive. It's not that thinking is useless. Thoughts do matter. They're like directions on a map, but a map without movement doesn't take you anywhere. Feeling is the movement, the action that breathes life into the thought, turning it into something the subconscious can accept as real. Think of a friend who says, "I'm fine," while clearly upset. You don't believe their words, you believe their energy. Your subconscious works the same way. It bypasses empty statements and responds only to the emotion beneath them. That's why the inner state always outweighs the outer claim. This explains why so many people live with the illusion of progress, saying the right things, reading all the books, practicing all the techniques, yet their life doesn't move. Because it's not about the mechanics of thinking, it's about the emotional atmosphere that saturates those thoughts. Neville's teaching was revolutionary because it exposed this hidden layer. He taught that imagination creates reality, but only when imagination is clothed with feeling. Without that clothing, imagination is just daydreaming. With feeling, it becomes a decree to the subconscious. So the question isn't, am I thinking the right thing? But am I feeling it as real? Because in the end, thought points, but feeling commands. And now the real mystery unfolds. If feeling is the language of the subconscious, how does it actually respond to it? The subconscious doesn't speak in logic, words, or theories. It speaks in feeling. That's why Neville Goddard insisted that imagination creates reality only when infused with emotion. It's not the statement, "I am free," that matters. It's the felt experience of freedom that rewires the inner script. Think about dreams. In a dream, you don't analyze or argue with yourself. You feel as if the situation is real. Fear in a nightmare is just as physical as fear in waking life. The subconscious doesn't care if the scene is real or imagined. It registers the feeling as fact. This is why thought versus emotion manifestation is so important to understand. Thoughts are like signals, but feelings are the actual message. The subconscious doesn't respond to a dry command. It responds to the emotional atmosphere you consistently live in. That atmosphere becomes your identity. Picture someone walking into a room with heavy energy. Nobody needs words to know something's wrong. You feel it instantly. That's how the subconscious operates. It's constantly tuning into the emotional climate you carry, not the sentences you repeat on the surface. This is why affirmations not working makes sense. If someone says, "I'm abundant," while vibrating anxiety every time they pay a bill, the subconscious records anxiety, not abundance. Feeling is the secret because it overrides verbal declarations and dictates the state you embody. Neville often said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled." He didn't say, "Repeat the thought." Why? Because assumption is emotional, not intellectual. To live in the end is to walk around with the emotional tone of "already done," no matter what your senses report. Think of a thermostat. You can declare it's warm all day, but until you set the temperature, nothing changes. The subconscious is that thermostat. It locks onto the emotional setting you live in, and until you change the feeling, the outer world remains the same. This is why imagination creates reality only when it's embodied. To visualize a new home while feeling doubt is useless, but to visualize while sinking into the relief, gratitude, and joy of already living there, that's when the subconscious takes the picture and projects it onto your reality. The beauty of this is that you don't have to fight or beg. The subconscious doesn't resist, it simply accepts. Whatever you feel deeply enough, it adopts as truth. That's why Neville said the subconscious responds to feeling, not effort. The secret is surrender, not struggle. So if the subconscious only understands feeling, the real question becomes, how can someone shift from positive thinking into a genuine emotional state that transforms everything? That's where the illusion of positive thinking needs to be exposed. We live in a culture obsessed with positive thinking. Bookshelves are filled with slogans like "think happy thoughts" or "stay positive and good things will come." But have you noticed how many people practice this daily and still feel stuck? That's because thinking isn't the same as feeling. Neville Goddard warned against this trap. He explained that you can repeat hopeful ideas all day long, but if your inner atmosphere remains anxious, doubtful, or fearful, nothing changes. Positive thinking without an emotional shift is like painting over rust. It looks shiny for a while, but the corrosion remains. This is why people get frustrated when affirmations aren't working. They're speaking words of abundance while secretly living in a state of lack. The subconscious doesn't care about the phrase "I'm wealthy." It cares about the emotional climate of scarcity they keep returning to. Think of it like smiling for a photo when you're actually upset. The outside world sees the smile, but anyone who knows you can sense the truth behind it. The subconscious works the same way. It ignores the mask of thought and responds only to the energy underneath. This explains why so many chase positive vibes only, but still feel exhausted. They're fighting their true emotions instead of transforming them. Suppressing negativity isn't creation, it's denial. And denial never fools the subconscious, because the emotional state is what it always obeys. Neville taught that imagination creates reality, but only when it's alive with feeling. Empty, happy thoughts are like balloons without helium. They float for a moment, then collapse. Feeling is the secret that lifts them into the sky, making them real in the subconscious. Positive thinking also creates pressure. People start blaming themselves. If I had thought better, this wouldn't have happened. But it's not about policing every thought. It's about the state you consistently dwell in. A few stray thoughts don't matter if your dominant feeling is secure. Imagine repeating, "I'm safe," while walking on thin ice. No matter how positive the words, your body feels the danger. The subconscious accepts the fear, not the phrase. True safety is only felt when you stand on solid ground. That's the difference between empty thinking and felt reality. So the illusion of positive thinking is dangerous because it keeps people busy without real change. They think they're manifesting, but in truth, they're recycling the same emotional state. And the outer world simply mirrors it back again and again, which is why Neville always brought us back to the heart of it. Feeling is the secret, because only when thought is clothed with genuine feeling does it turn into creation. And now we can begin to dive into that phrase more deeply, to see why it truly is the foundation of everything. Few phrases have carried as much weight in Neville Goddard's teachings as this one. Feeling is the secret. It's not just a nice idea, it's the cornerstone of manifestation. Every desire, every dream, every shift in life depends not on what we think, but on what we feel to be true. Neville taught that the subconscious responds only to feeling. Thought is the spark, imagination is the canvas, but feeling is the paint that colors it in. Without feeling, the picture stays invisible. With feeling, the subconscious accepts it as reality, and the outer world begins to mirror it back. Think of an actor on stage. He doesn't just recite lines, he embodies them. The audience believes because he feels the role. The subconscious works the same way. It isn't moved by empty affirmations, but by the sincerity of felt emotion. That's why feeling seals the reality. When someone tries affirmations not working, it's usually because they're stuck at the surface. They're thinking abundance but feeling lack. They're saying love but feeling loneliness. And the subconscious faithfully reproduces the feeling because that's the language it knows best. Neville often described living in the end, stepping into the state where the wish is already fulfilled. And the way to do that is through feeling. You don't think I'll be free someday. You feel freedom now, relief in your chest, gratitude in your heart, certainty in your bones. Feeling is the secret because it bypasses the intellect. You can argue with a thought, doubt it, analyze it, but a feeling is immediate. It doesn't need proof, it convinces the subconscious on the spot. That's why even a short moment of genuine feeling outweighs hours of forced thinking. Imagine holding a baby. You don't need to think, I love this child. You feel it instantly. The subconscious accepts that feeling without question. Now apply that same principle to your desires. The more real you feel them, the faster they root themselves into your inner world. This is also why thought versus emotion manifestation is such a vital distinction. Thought without feeling is like a melody without sound, silent. But once you attach the emotional tone, it becomes music that the subconscious cannot ignore. Feeling transforms potential into certainty. So when Neville declared feeling is the secret, he wasn't being poetic, he was revealing the formula. The emotional state of manifestation is the only signal the subconscious truly obeys. Change the feeling, and the world must follow. That's the law of assumption in action. And yet, knowing that feeling is the key naturally leads to the next question. How do we actually merge thought with feeling in practice so that affirmations stop being empty words and start becoming living realities? Knowing that feeling is the secret is powerful, but the next step is learning how to actually merge thought with feeling. Neville Goddard explained that this is where real creation begins, not in endless repetition, but in the fusion of an idea with a lived emotional state. That fusion makes it real. The technique is simple yet profound. When you affirm something, slow down. Don't rush through the words like a checklist. Close your eyes, take a breath, and let the thought settle. Then, instead of forcing it, allow an image or a scene to naturally rise in your imagination. Neville often recommended short, vivid imaginal acts. For instance, if you're affirming abundance, don't just say, I am abundant. Picture a friend congratulating you, or imagine yourself checking a bank account with relief and joy. That scene becomes the container where thought and feeling merge. Here's the crucial part. Linger in the feeling. It's not about visualizing perfectly. It's about letting the emotions seep into your body. Your shoulders drop, your breath eases, maybe even a smile forms. That shift means the subconscious is receiving the message, not just your conscious mind. Think of it like seasoning food. Words are the ingredients, but feeling is the flavor. Without seasoning, the dish is bland and forgettable. With seasoning, it becomes unforgettable. The subconscious tastes the flavor of feeling and accepts it as truth. For example, if your affirmation is about love, don't just repeat, I am loved. Instead, imagine the warmth of someone's hand in yours, the sound of laughter, the comfort of being seen. That sensory richness makes the feeling tangible, and the subconscious records it as a lived fact. This technique isn't about effort, it's about surrender. The more natural the scene feels, the more effective it is. That's why Neville always emphasized short imaginal acts, because a few seconds of real feeling outweigh minutes of empty repetition. Quality beats quantity. Over time, the practice becomes second nature. You start noticing that certain affirmations don't need to be spoken aloud anymore. They live inside you. The thought and feeling have merged so deeply that the state feels natural, like slipping into your favorite sweater. This is when affirmations stop being work and start being identity. You're no longer trying to convince yourself. You're living from the felt state. And that's when the outer world begins to shift, because the subconscious now carries a new imprint of truth. And the beauty is this: once you learn how to merge thought with feeling, you start noticing signs that it's working. Little confirmations appear in your world, subtle shifts that show you've crossed from thinking into truly feeling. One of the most common questions people ask is, how do I know if I'm just thinking about my desire or if I've truly begun to feel it? The answer lies in the subtle signs that show the shift. When thought sinks into emotion, everything about your inner world starts to change. First, the words of your affirmation begin to feel natural. At the start, they might sound forced or fake, like wearing clothes that don't fit. But once feeling merges with thought, the words slide easily, as if they've always belonged to you. That ease is a clear signal. Another sign is physical relaxation. When you're stuck in thought, your body often feels tense, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, breath shallow. But when the emotional state of manifestation takes over, your body softens. You exhale deeply, and a sense of relief replaces the effort. Doubt also begins to lose its grip. You may still notice old fears whispering, but they no longer dominate. It's like being in a room with background noise. You hear it, but it doesn't bother you. The felt state carries more weight, so the doubts gradually fade into the background. You'll also notice small external confirmations. A conversation, a song, a random event aligns with your inner state. These aren't coincidences, they're reflections. The subconscious, once impressed with feeling, begins to reorganize your world. These signs feel like winks from the universe. Another powerful indicator is gratitude. Not forced gratitude, but natural, effortless thankfulness. You start feeling grateful before anything has happened outwardly. That's because inside, it already feels done. Gratitude becomes the byproduct of your emotional reality, not a practice to force. There's also a quiet confidence that arises. You stop obsessively checking for results. The same way you don't dig up a seed every day to see if it's growing, you stop doubting the process. The felt state assures you it's already done. That calm certainty is a huge sign. Even your imagination changes. Instead of desperately visualizing outcomes, you find yourself casually daydreaming from the state of the wish fulfilled. It feels playful, light, even fun. Imagination shifts from being a chore to being a natural extension of your emotional state. You'll notice your reactions to life shifting as well. Situations that once triggered fear or scarcity now meet with a calmer, steadier response. This shows your subconscious has been impressed with a new pattern. You're no longer reacting as the old self. You're responding as the new one. And finally, you feel at home in the state. It doesn't feel like pretending anymore. It feels like you. That's the true measure that you've moved from thinking into feeling. And once you've crossed that bridge, the next challenge becomes, how do you persist in this felt state long enough for it to solidify? The real art of manifestation isn't just reaching the state of the wish fulfilled once. It's learning how to remain there. Neville Goddard called this persistence, the ability to keep dwelling in the felt reality even when the outer world hasn't yet caught up. This is where many stumble. At first, the state feels exciting, almost electric. You touch the feeling of already having what you want, and for a moment it feels undeniable. But then old circumstances whisper, doubts creep in, and the temptation to return to the old emotional state becomes strong. That's the real test. Persistence doesn't mean straining or forcing yourself. It means gently returning again and again to the feeling of the end. Just like meditation, when your mind wanders, you don't punish yourself. You bring it back with kindness. The same applies here. Softly return to the felt state. Think of it like tuning an instrument. The first strum may sound off, but with small adjustments the note becomes clear. Persisting in the felt state is like that, consistently adjusting your inner tone until it naturally vibrates with the reality you've assumed. Practical tools help. Neville suggested revisiting short imaginal scenes before sleep, the drowsy state being perfect for impressing the subconscious. Others use music, journaling, or moments of quiet gratitude. The method doesn't matter as much as the consistency of re-entering the emotional state. You'll know you're persisting when the new state feels more natural than the old one. Scarcity, fear, or doubt may still knock at the door, but they no longer feel like home. Instead, abundance, security, or love becomes your baseline. That's the power of repetition in feeling, not in thought. Persistence also means ignoring the evidence of the senses. Neville reminded us that the world is a mirror, and mirrors take time to catch up. If you wait for physical proof before you persist, you'll quit too soon. You persist because the feeling itself is the proof. Over time, this felt state hardens into fact. What once felt like imagination begins to feel like identity. You're not trying anymore, you simply are. That shift is what forces the external world to conform, because reality has no choice but to echo the inner assumption. It's important to understand that persisting isn't about perfection. You don't need to feel it 24/7. You just need to return often enough that the state becomes your dominant mood. Like tending a garden, it's the consistent watering, not the occasional drought, that determines growth. And once persistence becomes second nature, something remarkable happens. Creation no longer feels like effort. It feels like life itself. And that realization prepares us for the final truth, what the real creative act actually is, beyond thought, beyond words, anchored fully in feeling. At the heart of Neville Goddard's teaching lies this truth. The real creative act isn't thinking, it's feeling. Thoughts may spark ideas, but without emotional conviction, they're just passing clouds. Feeling anchors them, impresses them on the subconscious, and transforms them into lived reality. Neville often compared thought to a seed and feeling to soil. A seed left on a desk will never grow, no matter how perfect it is. But once it's placed in fertile ground, life begins to unfold. In the same way, thought must be planted in feeling to bear fruit. This is why imagination creates reality only when it's clothed with feeling. A scene imagined without emotion is daydreaming. But when the scene is saturated with the emotional state of manifestation, joy, relief, gratitude, it becomes a creative decree etched into the subconscious. Think of an artist. The sketch outlines the form, but it's the color, texture, and shading that bring it to life. Thought is the sketch, feeling is the color. The subconscious responds to the masterpiece, not the outline. That's the true creative act. When people complain about affirmations not working, it's because they're trying to create with sketches alone. Words without emotion are outlines without paint. The subconscious doesn't respond to empty shapes. It responds to the vibrant, living feeling of already done. And here's the paradox. The real creative act feels effortless. It's not about straining, convincing, or begging. It's about surrendering into the felt state and allowing the subconscious to accept it. Creation happens naturally when thought and feeling are fused as one. This is also why Neville emphasized living in the end. To live in the end is to walk around as if it's already yours, not pretending, but embodying the feeling of fulfillment. In that state, you're no longer trying to create, you're simply allowing what already is to unfold. The subconscious doesn't negotiate or analyze, it mirrors. Whatever emotional state you persist in becomes the world you meet. The real creative act, then, isn't about controlling circumstances, but about choosing which feelings to live in. The outer world has no choice but to comply. So the creative act isn't about doing more, it's about being more. Being the person who already feels free, already feels loved, already feels abundant. That inner beingness is what stamps itself on reality. The thought starts it, but the feeling seals it. And once you grasp this, manifestation no longer feels like a struggle. It feels like a natural extension of who you are. Because the real creative act isn't about trying to make things happen, it's about becoming the version of you who feels them as already real, and that's the bridge to living it fully. So let me ask you, how much longer will you keep relying on thoughts alone, hoping they'll change your world? How many times will you repeat affirmations that never touch your heart? And how different would your life look if, instead of thinking about your desire, you finally began to feel it as already yours? Because here's the truth, your subconscious doesn't negotiate, it mirrors. If you dwell in fear, it gives you more reasons to fear. If you persist in the state of the wish fulfilled, it opens doors you couldn't imagine. The choice isn't about the words you speak, it's about the feelings you choose to embody. So, starting tonight, experiment. Instead of asking, when will it come? Ask yourself, how does it feel now that it's already here? Let that feeling become your dwelling place. That's how you stop chasing results and start living in the end, exactly as Neville taught. And if this message spoke to you, don't just let it pass. Subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications and stay close, because every week we dive deeper into Neville Goddard's teachings, the law of assumption, and how to finally make feeling your greatest creative power. Your life doesn't change when you think harder, it changes when you feel deeper, and that journey is just beginning.